Hey everybody, it's Joe with the How To Guys, back again with another video on iPad screen repair, updated for the cellular enabled models here in 2018. I'm just gonna turn on the iPad here, make sure what's working, what isn't, make sure all the buttons work. The screen has a little crack down in the corner, and I'm heating it up here with a heat gun to slowly loosen up some of the glue that's holding that screen down. I've seen a lot of videos recently on this technique, but some of them are very long, like up to an hour, so I'm going to try and kind of burn through this really quickly. So I'm heating up with the heat gun, and you want to just enable this crack to form between the case and the screen. Now, before you start going along and doing this, those three arrows there represent three places that you need to be particularly careful of, along with down on the bottom near the home button just to the right of it. So move around the iPad, you're going to heat it up with the heat gun, and you're just going to slip your spudger tool or your credit cards or your guitar picks into the crack between the screen and the case bezel. And it can be hard to get it started. It takes a little bit of force. You want to start down at that bottom right corner where I started, because there's no ribbons underneath, no power ribbons that you need to be careful of cutting. You can see where I'm working now. I'm coming up to some of the ribbons that interact with the buttons on the side of the iPad up there. You want to be very careful here. So instead of using this deep metal spudger that kind of disrupts all the glue all the way to the LCD screen, I'm gonna here use this really shallow plastic tool that just opens up the crack and doesn't really get down deep into the iPad, so that I am not at risk of cutting any of those ribbons and I won't have to replace them. I'm going to move, just opening up the crack between the screen and the bezel until I get to the other side of that ribbon right there on the corner. Then I can slide a guitar pick in there and start moving along the top. Now, I can't stress enough here, there are two cellular antennae on either side of the camera, and when you're taking the screen off, even though it's cracked, you won't really want to be patient. So you're gonna heat, move a little further, heat, move a little further. Start by just opening the crack near the bezel where these antennae and the camera are, and then you can slide the pick or the metal spudger in and try to kind of saw away that glue between the antenna and the digitizer. You're just trying to lift the digitizer off of all these sensitive components that are kind of glued to it. So I'm leaving all of this in the video so you can see kind of how painstaking it is. So now we're getting down to the bottom side of the iPad, and here you have the home button, and then you also have, where my hand is right now, where I'm focusing on, a Wi-Fi adapter. It's going to have this green arrow pointing to it. You do not want to slide this spudger digging downwards into that. You can sever it, and that would be pretty awful to do. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the spudger and I'm focusing the force upwards against the glass screen that I'll be taking off, and just kind of moving it back and forth in slow, kind of almost slicing motions, cutting through that glue between the sensitive component and the screen. Once you get a pick in between there, from here on out it's pretty much clear sailing, as long as you're replacing the digitizer. If you are trying to save the digitizer and you're going deeper down into the iPad to replace the battery or a different component, then you also want to beware on the left side for the ribbon of the digitizer, and you'll see where that is as soon as I get this digitizer pulled off. It's about an inch up from the bottom on the left side of the iPad, but you'll be able to see where that is. So now I'm getting to the section, the corner where the screen is broken, and you might have been dealing with this problem the whole way around if you had a really shattered screen. But I'm gonna be really careful here, move really slowly, and you could even wear gloves for this part. These pieces are glass and they're really sharp. You want to use the heat gun a lot and keep the glue really soft so that the digging's a lot easier the last thing you want to do is dig down into something or hurt the LCD screen, especially where I am right now. I'm kind of rounding the corner and I'm coming up on the ribbon for the digitizer right where I'm at right now with the spudger. If I was trying to reinstall the same digitizer, I'd be very, very careful there, as I was near the antenna of the iPad. In this case, it doesn't matter, so I'm just gonna kind of plow through there, and then I'm giving that last side one last really good heat. We're gonna open the iPad by the original side that we first opened, so you want to heat everything one last time and then put your head down and check that crack as you're slowly prying up the digitizer. You want to ensure that there's no sensitive components, any of the things that we've been talking about that are still attached to the digitizer. If they come up with it, you're going to be pretty mad at yourself at this point after all the time you've put in. So patience, again, is just so important here. Now that we have the digitizer off, we can take off the LCD screen. It's held on by these 4 screws. So I'm going to go ahead and unscrew those 4 screws, and I store them on a piece of tape. You can also use a magnet, anything that's going to keep you from losing them. You don't want to wait for replacements to come in the mail. You can put them in an envelope if you want, whatever works for you. As you go along checking the LCD screen, try not to touch it to get fingerprints on it, and also if you find any little pieces of glass or chunks of glue that are still connected to the frame from the digitizer, take those off too with your tweezers or with a little razor blade. But if you're using a razor, be really careful of any power ribbons or the LCD screen. You don't want to cut through anything or scratch anything. The LCD screen, once you have the 4 screws off, you can rotate it out of the way. The cord for it should be glued down to the case, so gently detach that with the spudger, and then there's going to be this connector port that has a bar holding it down. Don't pull the bar up from the middle. There's some sensitive connections there. Pull it up from the sides using a tweezer and be patient with it. It'll come up, and once it's up, you can just use a plastic spudger to kind of push the connector out of its port and then get the LCD screen out of the way. The broken digitizer ribbon is held in a similar way, but with plastic clamps. So just pop those plastic clamps up, and then you can pull the ribbon up from the case and then kind of pull it out from its connector port, freeing the digitizer and getting it out of your way finally. You do want to pay attention to this ribbon and how it's folded in the case. It's kind of wrapped in there in a way under the LCD screen and above it. That keeps it from pushing the digitizer up once you put the new one on. You don't want to have that ribbon pushing up and bubbling up your screen. So take note of how they tucked it into the case. It's really important to mimic that when you're putting everything back together. Now I'm just going through and I'm gently scraping away any of the glue that's left on the case, being really careful not to slice through anything. And I'm also reshaping the bezel as I go, that little plastic bezel. I was really prying against it a lot with the spudger to get the digitizer off. You can get replacements. They're just little pieces of plastic that you put in. But I found that for the most part, if you use a razor and tweezers and the spudger, you can reshape it pretty easily back to something that's, for the most part, acceptable. Also, as you go through, take out any glass, take out any extra glue. You're just cleaning up the whole case, getting ready to put everything back in. The cleaner you get everything, the better your new digitizer is going to stick. So if it helps to use some rubbing alcohol or something to get some of that glue off, do it very carefully, but go ahead and do that. You'll see here the new digitizer I got. It has a film over both sides of the screen to protect it while you're installing it. Make sure to pull the inner one off just before you flip the digitizer over onto the LCD screen. Also, there are plastic covers over all of the glue strips that you'll need to pull off just before flipping as well. You're going to start by putting the new ribbon into the port and flipping those plastic clips back over. You want to make sure to tuck that ribbon into the case and make sure it stays tucked when you go to put the LCD screen in and when you go to fold the digitizer back over. Bring the LCD back to the port, put it in, and fold that metal clip down, touching only the sides of the clip, not the middle. Try to push the cord back down onto the case. It should still be sticky there. And then rotate the LCD into place and screw it in. Here on the digitizer, I'm marking a metal plate that protects the camera and the glue strips that you'll need to pull the plastic covering off of before laying the digitizer down. I find that it's helpful to peel that metal plate off of the digitizer because sometimes they're installed kind of poorly, and put it over the camera itself before laying the digitizer down. Here I've pointed out the ribbon on the digitizer after the LCD is down. You want to make sure that enough of it is pushed under the LCD and tucked into the case, and then you also want to, as you're flipping the digitizer up, make sure to fold that in towards the LCD using a plastic spudger so that it doesn't get in the way of the glue. Don't forget to wipe down the LCD screen with a microfiber cloth, and then take the plastic covering off the inside of the digitizer. Also remove the plastic covering from the glue on the inside of the digitizer, and then carefully fold the digitizer over onto the case. I try to power up the iPad and ensure that the new digitizer is working while keeping it warm so that the glue doesn't set before letting it finally harden on and pressing tight. Once I ensure that the iPad's working perfectly, then I'll heat one more time with the heat gun and kind of go along the edges of the new digitizer, snapping it into the bezel flush. Then I'll take a towel, lay the iPad down so that it puts the pressure on the corners and the edges, and then I'll put about 10 pounds worth of books on top of that and leave it overnight to let the glue set. Thanks so much for watching our video. I hope we were able to help you out, and if you have any questions, let us know.